me tell you about the big eyeball in the sky.
During the intermission of Primus's career where the band was disbanded, Les Claypool dabbled into a myriad of musical side projects, a lot of which could get coverage on the channel in some way, to be honest. The man just has an interesting creative process and songwriting style that ended up in him working with some icons across the board. One such group formed in 2002 for a magical year of oddities called Colonel Claypool's Bucket of Bernie Brains. The experimental love child featuring Les on bass and vocals, fellow musical weirdo and virtuoso Buckethead on guitars, former Primus bandmate Brian Brain Mantia, and iconic funk keyboardist Bernie Worrell on keys. The group was more of a live act that jammed, but what Meeting of a Minds isn't, right? They did some shows and just kind of musically felt each other out. The fruits of that period on the stage eventually led to them in the studio, morphing that energy into something digestible that is turning 20 this year. It's the sole release from the project titled The Big Eyeball in the Sky.
Like I said during my Sonic & Knuckles video last month, you never forget your first, and amidst my diving through the Les Claypool side project discography that happened during the era of non-prolificness that was the 2000s for Primus, I bought the Colonel Claypool Bernie Bot Brains soul outing, The Great Eyeball in the Sky, on iTunes, because it was very hard to find a physical copy of in my local area. While I'm sure I could, I didn't think about buying it online physically. However, through my spinnings of it throughout the years, I've gone across the gambit with this project because it is, for all intents and purposes, a supergroup side project the likes of a band like Chickenfoot. But I love what Les, Bernie, Buckethead, and Brian all pulled together within this very jam-forward project. You can tell a lot of these songs were wrought from the simple idea that could be experimented on in a live setting, but I would argue by and large where that could feel like a real slipping point for some artists. By and large, this group creates a solid batch of tracks to carry this sort of quirky funk atmosphere forward for the listener. I think that it starts really strongly with an introduction song for Buckethead. I think he does some really good shredding on the studio version of this song. I think that Tying Noodles after that, with how its verses are structured, almost feels very in line with Les's brand of funk oddity, specifically in a way that I think is also incredibly choice. Same with Tyranny of the Hunt. The lead riff on that is just quirky as hell. And in that same breath, I know I have a tendency to throw a lot of love to Les in how he can kind of shape a project, but like the solo work from Brain and Bernie are also fucking awesome. Bernie's leads on Jackalope also really make that song its own, and the same can be said for any time his sound crops up. I think that even if some of the songs may not wholly come together as well as others, like I think that the middle portion of the record, post the excellent Elephant Ghost, which is like a 10-minute just like dub-inspired jam, have a couple songs that get a little too monotonous in the songwriting department, like Hip Shot from the Slab or Scott Taylor, while the soloing on Scott Taylor in the recordings is really cool. And again, the organ sounds and all that are awesome. I just think that that song in particular doesn't necessarily hit me the same as like 48 Hours to Go or Ignorance is Bliss, just ethereal sound that closes the album out.
Which one could argue those cyclical lyrics and the lack of substance therein don't really matter. There's a lot of instrumental stuff on here. It's a jam band focused project, but I would argue the moments where it sounds less like the framework for which to jam around are something that I would have loved to have seen more of in hindsight, given especially the initial run of this record being as relatively well-rounded as it is, you know, and again, for all of the great soloing that crops up on the songs that I had some complaints about, it's just something that, again, 20 years with it in the rear view, with this project being an entity within the less echelon of side projects, this one in particular has always left me like, with more of those highlights in retrospect.
As a kid, I kind of got wrapped up in all of the just fancy musicianship on display, but as I've gotten older, while I can really still appreciate that, what I've loved coming back to is seeing sort of a look into what was a live experience for a period of time, which I think is indicative of a lot of Les's sort of experiments throughout this era. I used to have records like Purple Onion on CD as well, and I think that he's a very interesting artist. That's why I've talked about Primus so much, and I think that, like, as far as 2000s funk gems, I think that The Big Eyeball in the Sky is absolutely that. While that era was also full of, like, super groups out the ass, I think that Les, when he decided to make stuff in those realms, the musicians he had just really vibed with his style and sort of played off of him incredibly well, and this is a really good showing of that. Everything sounds so fucking clean, which is also part of the reason why I think I enjoy it as an experience. While the tonality and the character isn't lost in anybody's musicianship. In fact, that's something else that I really like about this, is that everything gets to shine. You know, everyone has their solos and stuff, but like the production, even though it is super clean and lets all of their moments shine even brighter, that personality isn't lost in that production. And that's something that I've griped about in certain releases, especially over the last handful of years, that fall into this like proggy jam style, is that the production can really make or break, and usually I can be pretty harsh on clean production, but the production on this record is really, really fucking choice in my opinion. Ironically enough, I wasn't going to talk about this album, even though it had a lot of things going for it that fit sort of the energy of what I was making at the time, and I've been trying to make like funk videos still recurring throughout my 30s, and this would be a perfect candidate for that, on top of it being the 20th anniversary. But when the anniversary came and went, and while I was spinning this at the time, I just kind of felt like maybe I won't talk about this, and I'll just talk about another Les side project another day. But then Primus lost their drummer, and ironically enough, this album has the drummer that originally replaced that drummer within it as well, so there was like another layer to the coincidentalness of me keeping this in my rotation. But either way, Primus are in need of a drummer, and if you are comfortable with that style and can really think you can jive with him and Lair, with Les and Lair, I'd say shoot your shot. While I like to drum, I don't think I'm as good as the caliber that they would require, but I do think that a drummer is out there for them that can help them continue their legacy forward. This, at the end of the day, while maybe not my favorite Les side project, which would be a topic I would love to maybe cover someday on this channel, I do still remember it fondly because, again, you never quite forget your first. And while I had ripped albums onto my iTunes via the CDs that I had, I'll always have a special place in my heart for this record, for it being the first thing I bought digitally on their storefront. Do you have fond memories with this album? Did you know this album even existed? Have you followed and gone down the rabbit hole of Les's side projects? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you like this album, let me know in the comments down below. 2004 was a long time ago, wasn't it? If you like this look back on a classic, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. If you missed it online, I am dropping the listening log this Friday with another beefy set of reviews for you to enjoy or not. But either way, I'm going to go. Thank you again so very much for watching. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.